This is the story of Sarah Martinez and the mysterious man who sat at table 12 every single day for 2 years, until one day, he simply didn't show up. What she found out 3 weeks later would change everything she thought she knew about kindness, healing, and the invisible battles people fight every day. Sarah Martinez has worked as a librarian at Cedar Falls Public Library for 8 years. At 32, she knows every regular patron, every creaking floorboard, and every book that hasn't been checked out in months. But there's one person who stands out from all the rest. Every day at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, an elderly man walks through those heavy oak doors. He never speaks to anyone, never asks for directions, never needs help finding anything. He heads straight to the military history section, pulls the same worn books about World War II aviation from the shelves, and settles into his spot at table 12 by the window. Sarah learns his name from the library checkout system. Robert Thompson, 68 years old. That weathered leather jacket he wears tells its own story. Air Force patches faded from years of wear, unit insignias that speak of service and sacrifice. For months, Sarah watches this silent ritual. Robert arrives at 2, reads until exactly 4, then leaves without a word. But Sarah begins to notice something else. The careful way he handles each book, the notes he scribbles in an old notebook, the distant look in his eyes when he stares out that window. One cold December afternoon, Sarah makes a decision that will change both their lives. She approaches table 12 with a steaming cup of coffee and quietly sets it down beside Robert's books. He looks up, surprised, and for the first time in months, their eyes meet. "Thank you," he says simply, his voice rough from disuse. That single moment breaks the ice. Sarah starts leaving books she thinks he might enjoy on his table before he arrives. She bookmarks interesting passages about aviation history, and slowly, very slowly, Robert begins to respond with small nods, brief smiles, and the occasional, "This was excellent," when returning a book. Winter turns to spring, and their wordless friendship deepens. Sarah discovers Robert's particular interest in pilot biographies, especially stories of courage under fire. She starts setting aside new acquisitions, rare finds, anything that might capture his attention. One afternoon, Sarah places a book about the Tuskegee Airmen on his table. When Robert sees it, something extraordinary happens. He actually smiles, a real, genuine smile that transforms his entire face. "I flew with some of these men," he tells her quietly. "True heroes, every one of them." It's the most he's ever said to her, and Sarah realizes she's glimpsed something precious, a crack in the wall Robert has built around himself. Their conversations remain brief, but they grow warmer. Robert starts arriving a few minutes early, and sometimes stays a few minutes late. Sarah learns he served in Vietnam, that he lost friends there, that reading about other pilots' experiences somehow helps him process his own. But she also notices the shadows that cross his face when he thinks no one is looking, the way his hands sometimes shake when he turns certain pages, the careful distance he maintains from everyone around him. The notebook is always there, and Robert writes in it constantly. Sarah respects his privacy, but she can't help wondering what memories he's recording, what thoughts he's trying to capture. As their second year of this routine continues, Sarah begins to look forward to Robert's visits more than she expects. His quiet presence has become an anchor in her day, a reminder that healing can happen in the most unexpected places. Then, on a Tuesday in late September, Robert doesn't show up. Sarah waits by the window, watching the door. 2 o'clock comes and goes. 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Table 12 sits empty, and for the first time in 2 years, those aviation books remain on the shelf. Wednesday passes the same way. Then Thursday. By the end of the week, Sarah is genuinely worried. She checks the patron database, but there's no contact information beyond his name. Days turn into weeks. Sarah finds herself glancing at table 12 dozens of times each day, hoping to see that familiar figure in the weathered leather jacket. But the chair remains empty, and a hollow feeling settles in her chest. 3 weeks after Robert's disappearance, for elderly men in crisp Air Force uniforms walk through the library doors. They move with military precision, but their faces carry the weight of sorrow. They approach the circulation desk and ask specifically for Sarah Martinez. "Ma'am," says their leader, introducing himself as retired Colonel James Mitchell, "we need to talk to you about Robert Thompson." Sarah's heart sinks. She knows, somehow, what they're going to tell her. They gather around table 12, Robert's table, and Colonel Mitchell explains that Robert passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks ago. He was a decorated pilot who served 3 tours in Vietnam, a man who carried survivor's guilt for 4 decades after his squadron was shot down, and he was the only one who made it home. He had no family, Colonel Mitchell continues, but he left specific instructions. Everything he owned goes to veteran support organizations, except for 2 things. The colonel places Robert's old notebook on the table, along with a worn pilot's insignia and a sealed envelope addressed to Sarah. "He talked about you know," says another of the airmen. "Said you were the first person in decades who saw him as a human being instead of a broken veteran, said your kindness reminded him there was still good in the world. Sarah opens the envelope with trembling hands. Inside is a letter in Robert's careful handwriting, explaining how their brief interactions became the highlight of his days, how her simple gestures of warmth helped heal wounds he thought would never close. But more than that, Robert left her his notebook, 2 years of memories, reflections, and gratitude for the woman who showed him that healing could happen in the quiet moments between strangers. Sarah decides to honor Robert's memory by publishing his journal as Silent Flights, A Lonely Pilot's Journey. The book becomes a bestseller, with all proceeds donated to veteran support organizations. The library creates a reading corner in Robert's memory, and Sarah becomes an advocate for veterans' mental health, sharing their story to show how small acts of kindness can change lives. Table 12 now holds a small plaque in memory of Robert Thompson, pilot, veteran, friend. Sometimes the most important connections happen without words. If this story moved you, share your own experience with unexpected connections in the comments below. Have you ever been touched by a stranger's kindness, or made a difference in someone's life without even knowing it? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the extraordinary power of ordinary human compassion, because sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply see each other as human beings deserving of dignity and care.